And welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, to our lecture series on ancient Greece. This is the first installment on our series of lectures and a fairly brief overview of some of the basic geographical land features and historical aspects of ancient Greece. Now, in an earlier series, we looked at Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations, and as a result of that, we're not going to recover those, but remember, those are the civilizations that took us from the kind of early origins of Greek civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean from approximately 2500 BCE all the way down to around 1100 BCE. We're going to pick up with that story from here, but reorient ourselves first to the geography of the Aegean and ancient Greece. And really, essentially, what we have here is uh, we have the Greek mainland, we have the islands, and we have Ionia. Right? So this region over here. It's in Asia Minor. It's referred to as the Ionian Greeks. These cities had been settled there for millennia, really, up until Greek inhabitants lived in this region until just after World War I, when many of the Greeks who still lived, particularly in this area, were expelled during kind of some of the aftershocks of the First World War. The initial inhabitants, largely from down here, invadors tended to come down from the north. Uh, these city-states are established first, and then Greeks, over the course of the Dark Ages, really start to spread out across the islands. And then the colonies are already well established city-states by the time we get to the Archaic period. Okay? One of the things that we can really, though, talk about is the impact of geography, ecology, and economy on the development of these Greek city-states. The mountains, valleys, and islands really develop a sense of independence, a very fiercely independent streak among the Greek city-states. And they will develop their own sort of cultural milieu. The gods and goddesses, in essence, are in a sense monotheistic within that city-state. That city-state, that individual independent city-state, really is very devoted to one particular god or goddess. If we look, however, at the Greeks as a whole, then we would say that they were polytheistic, that they worshipped many gods and goddesses. And certainly in some of the larger, wealthier city-states that will emerge, we can say that they will worship multiple gods or goddesses, but it's kind of the luxury that comes with being a wealthy, powerful, independent city-state, that they can afford to worship multiple gods and goddesses, that they can have multiple sanctuaries and afford to support multiple priestly castes. So that's one of the issues that you have there, the relationship between this fearsome independent streak, divinities, and wealth. The climate and geography also played a huge role in the development of farming. Greece is not a large producer of wheat grains or white wheat grain. That would be the mainland of Egypt, the mainland in Assyria, the mainland even in Italy. Instead, because of the rugged mountainous territories and the marginal soil quality, the things that you're going to grow there are barley. That's a more marginal crop. A poorer soil will support barley where it won't support wheat. Olives grow on mountainside, grapes grow on mountainsides, and herding is really done on land that's much less even. Particularly sheep and goats are grazed here as opposed to cattle. Why sheep and goats? Well, they regularly produce milk that can be used to supplement a diet. Olives can be pressed into olive oil and exported and therefore maximize the profit you can make on an acre of land. The profits that you can then buy your food stuff with. So that's how the Greeks really have to manage their land in order to get the most out of it. Otherwise, you could not sustain the large populations that will develop in the Greek city-states on the available arable land if it's only planted in wheat. So you must produce a cash crop, sell it, and import your food. never be able to grow enough food to support the population that Greece will develop over the course of the centuries. Barley is good. It does make a dark bread, a brown bread, and it's also good for fodder for animals. As we mentioned a moment ago, olives and grapes are very important. This is why all throughout Greek literature it will be about olive oil and wine. It will be so important to them. The difficult nature of transportation over the mountains and through the valleys means that the Greeks will very quickly be seafaring peoples, and they will trade at length, both in short distance trade between the islands, but then eventually establishing long distance trade routes. One can say is that trade is what helped the Greeks sort of expand out into the islands. You know, as you're sailing along, you discover new places and establish settlements there. At the end of the Mycenaean age, remember that there was a series of invasions. We don't quite know what brought Mycenae down. It's a very difficult period to get a hold on because sources are so limited. And then the Dark Ages ensued. The Dark Ages last from roughly 1100 BCE right down to about 800 BCE. And it's referred to as the Dark Age because we don't know a lot about what happened, particularly in the Peloponnese. By about 800 BCE, however, Phoenician merchants begin showing up, and they're starting to increase their trade with Greeks, and they kind of pull the Greeks back out of their relative isolation and into the larger trade networks that are being established in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Greeks began sailing to Asia Minor, to Ionia, to the Black Sea region, to southern Italy, and to other parts of the Mediterranean. And in the same way that the Phoenicians are establishing kind of their widespread Mediterranean merchant empire, the Greeks will establish in a sense, a rival merchant empire throughout the Mediterranean. So that in places like the island of Sicily, there will be both Greek and Phoenician settlements. In North Africa, there will be Greek and Phoenician settlements. In southern France and in Spain, there will be Greek and Phoenician settlements. One of the most important aspects of this encounter, of course, is that the Greeks will eventually adopt the Phoenician alphabet. The Greeks had a language. They had a form of written language called Linear A and Linear B that were discussed again in an earlier lecture. The Phoenician alphabet is then brought in to stand for the Greek language. Now, same Greek language, now different way of representing it, and a relatively simple way of representing it too, as we know. And of course, the word alphabet comes from the first two letters of the Greek language, alpha and beta. So it is the way of writing that language. The Greeks, of course, do modify it a little bit to meet their own needs and to the specific sounds that are represented and indicated in the Greek language. All right, that's our little bit of an overview. The next thing we're going to look at is the beginning of the Archaic period, and that's going to be a much more developed lecture. So I look forward to talking about that great period in Greek history. For now, however, thank you very much.